The first spark of change began in a dusty research lab deep in the heart of Earth's most prestigious quantum physics institute. There, a team of the world's brightest minds was working on something that was meant to revolutionize the field of energy. They had no idea they were about to alter the course of human history forever. Dr. Lana Voss, a brilliant scientist with dark, tired eyes, had spent years trying to unlock the secrets of space-time. She was obsessed with the idea that the fabric of the universe could be manipulated, twisted, and controlled. Her team had been experimenting with the subatomic particles found within quantum fields, trying to harness them for a sustainable energy source. But instead of an energy breakthrough, they created something far more powerful. It started with an accidental surge of energy during an experiment, a burst of unimaginable intensity that sent waves of shock through the lab, making every particle vibrate at an unpredictable frequency. The scientists were caught in a chaos of flashing lights and crackling noise. When the dust finally settled, something had changed. The particles had fused with the DNA of the test subjects, altering their very genetic makeup. The human body, it seemed, had become a conduit for the very forces that governed the universe, space and time itself. At first, it was subtle. Dr. Voss herself was the first to realize something had shifted. After the accident, she found herself able to move across the lab in the blink of an eye. She felt her body grow lighter, as if gravity no longer held its grip on her. She could stretch time around her, pausing moments to savor them or to think through a decision. It was a fleeting sensation, nothing permanent, but it was enough to realize something had changed at a fundamental level. Soon, other members of her team began to exhibit similar changes, small things at first, flashes of teleportation, a slight distortion in the air when they walked through doors. They could manipulate their own bodies, shifting their form or floating a few inches off the ground. Then, the first real breakthrough came when one of the lab assistants, a young man named Liam, managed to reverse the flow of time in a small, localized space. A coffee cup sitting innocently on a table rolled off and shattered. He focused intently, and with a mental push, the cup reassembled itself and floated back to its original place. It was the first true demonstration of their newfound power. Within days, the lab's security systems detected the anomaly in the surrounding environment. Mysterious gravitational shifts and quantum disturbances. It wasn't just the lab that had been affected. The city around them began to experience subtle changes, as if they had been teleported without warning. Items would disappear, only to reappear moments later. The very air seemed to crackle with the energy of altered time and space. The first global news broadcast picked up the story. At first, it was just a curious anomaly. But when Dr. Voss herself appeared on live television to explain what had happened, the world realized something far more significant had occurred. Humans, she said, her face a mixture of awe and fear, have unlocked the power to manipulate the very fabric of reality. At first, the response from the global population was one of wonder. There were no immediate signs of danger, just flashes of new possibilities. People who had been diagnosed with terminal illnesses suddenly found themselves healed in an instant. Individuals who had been paralyzed discovered they could walk again. Time, once an unforgiving force, was suddenly at their mercy. Human consciousness was now free to explore the realms of existence they had once only dreamed of. But the wonder soon turned to fear as the true scope of what had been unleashed became clear. Nations scrambled to understand the full implications of this power. Governments quickly imposed restrictions, but it was already too late. With the ability to manipulate time and space now available to anyone with a genetic marker, control became impossible, as a genetic weapon was thought to be possible. And that was just the beginning. Across the globe, people began to test the limits of their newfound abilities. Some used them for personal gain, instantly traveling to remote places, acquiring wealth through time manipulation, and bending reality to suit their desires. Others saw the power as a form of protection, attempting to shield their homes and loved ones from the chaos that followed. But even in the face of such incredible potential, not everyone used their abilities with noble intent. Some saw the power as a means to take control, to dominate, to shape the world in their image. As the days turned into weeks, humanity realized that they were no longer bound by the constraints of time or space. The borders of nations, once so rigid and defined, became meaningless. The concept of time itself began to lose its significance. People could be in two places at once, or stay in a moment forever. Entire civilizations had evolved on Earth, evolving into a race that could alter the very course of history. But the rest of the galaxy, watching in silence, was not prepared for what was happening on this small, distant planet. The first communication from beyond the solar system came from the Troraki, an ancient race of telepaths who had long governed the peaceful, complex trade routes that spanned the galaxy. Their message was simple, but the fear in it was unmistakable. "What are you doing?" The Troraki had known of Earth for centuries, but their interest had always been academic. The humans were primitive, undeveloped, and had no place in the galaxy's grand affairs. But now the Troraki were seeing something that made them uneasy. Something they could neither understand nor control. The Troraki Council, a group of powerful minds who governed the galaxy's affairs, convened to discuss the unprecedented situation. They had always maintained the delicate balance between the galaxy's many factions. Their telepathic abilities allowed them to anticipate conflict, intervene before it spiraled out of control, and maintain harmony between civilizations. But they had never encountered a species like humanity, one capable of bending the very fabric of reality. They sensed that Earth's actions, though seemingly small, were destabilizing the natural flow of the universe itself. "We cannot allow this," said Zoreth, the leader of the Troraki. His mind buzzed with anxiety as he transmitted his thoughts to the council. "The humans do not understand the consequences of what they have unleashed. If they continue on this path, the galaxy itself will be torn apart." While the Troraki scrambled to formulate a plan, other factions in the galaxy took notice. The Arel, a race of genetically engineered warriors, saw the humans as a potential threat to their hard-earned dominance over the galaxy. They were used to controlling the stars, their empire stretching across vast regions of space. But now, their power was being questioned by a species whose mere existence had shattered the natural order. They saw the humans not as a gift, but as a challenge. If humanity could manipulate time and space, what was stopping them from undoing the Arel's centuries of conquest? The Centaur, an ancient and transcendent race, looked on with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. They had transcended the need for physical forms and existed as beings of pure consciousness. Their ability to perceive the universe in its entirety had allowed them to influence the natural progression of species. But the humans, these fragile beings, so small and insignificant in the grand scheme, had unlocked something even they could not comprehend. The Centaur recognized that the stability of the galaxy could no longer be guaranteed. And then there was the Qatari, a warlike species whose hunger for conquest was matched only by their ruthless desire to dominate. The Qatari had long kept their distance from the other races, preferring to wage war in the outer regions of the galaxy, but the rise of humanity was something they could not ignore. The Qatari viewed the humans as a threat, a wild card that could upset the delicate balance of power, and they saw an opportunity. From their base in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, the Qatari began preparing for an attack on Earth. They would not let this new species destabilize their empire. The humans' ability to manipulate time and space was something they needed to control or eliminate. As humanity's powers expanded and grew more unpredictable, the consequences of their actions became impossible to ignore. Space itself began to warp. Entire star systems flickered in and out of existence. Time loops caused entire cities to disappear, never to return. The galaxy, once a harmonious collection of advanced civilizations, now faced a crisis unlike anything it had ever encountered. Humanity had finally acquired the ultimate superpower. But the galaxy, for all its wisdom, was not prepared for what came next. The galaxy had been in a delicate balance for millennia, governed by a system of peace and power that was overseen by ancient beings and advanced species. But the sudden emergence of humanity's superpowers shattered everything. Earth, once an insignificant dot in the universe, had become a force that no one could ignore. The consequences were immediate and profound. The humans had not yet realized the full scale of the power they had unlocked. What began as a few isolated incidents, small teleportations and time manipulations, soon grew into something far more complex. As word spread and the world's governments began to understand the gravity of their situation, Earth's leaders scrambled to control the chaos. They imposed regulations, restricted access to the gene-altering technology that had granted them these abilities, and sought ways to prevent misuse. But it was too late. The abilities had spread too fast, and the gene was too contagious. Soon, every human on Earth had the power to manipulate space and time, to bend the very fabric of reality to their will. At first, this power was used to build new technologies and to cure diseases. People could heal their bodies at will, undoing years of aging or repairing injuries that would otherwise have been fatal. Entire cities were rebuilt in the blink of an eye as humans manipulated time to speed up construction processes or reverse the decay of their environments. The Earth was transformed into a utopia with no hunger, no poverty, no disease. It was paradise. But not everyone saw this as a blessing. The first group to question humanity's new power were the Troraki. The Troraki were an ancient race of telepaths, renowned for their ability to read minds and influence the thoughts of others. They had been monitoring Earth from afar, studying the human species for centuries. They had seen humans as a primitive, unstable species, not yet ready to join the larger galactic community. Their advancement was slow, and they had made little impact on the greater universe. But now, with the advent of this new power, the Troraki began to fear that humanity was no longer a species that could be ignored. They feared what would happen if the humans, who had no experience with the broader cosmic balance, began to use their powers recklessly. Xil'Vaan, the leader of the Troraki, called an emergency council meeting. The council room was bathed in soft, otherworldly light, and the long, translucent table was filled with the leaders of various telepathic factions. Xil'Vaan's voice echoed in their minds as he spoke, his thoughts heavy with concern. "The humans do not understand what they have done," Xil'Vaan said. "They have unlocked the ability to manipulate space and time itself. This is not a power that should be wielded by a race so young, so unstable. We cannot allow them to continue." One of the other council members, a female Troraki named Laris, spoke up, her thoughts laced with urgency. "But we cannot simply destroy them. We must be cautious. They have the potential to reshape everything. We must find a way to guide them, to contain them, before they become a threat." Xil'Vaan's mind flickered with a moment of doubt, but then his resolve hardened. "They will not listen. If we do not act, they will tear apart the very fabric of the galaxy." Haron frowned. Meanwhile, in the far reaches of the galaxy, the Arel had also taken notice of humanity's newfound powers. The Arel were a genetically engineered race of warriors, bred for strength and combat. Their empire stretched across many star systems, and their military prowess was unmatched. They had been content with their dominance, using their superior technology and genetic enhancements to maintain control. But now, the rise of humanity presented a new challenge. The Arel Council convened, their tall, powerful figures towering over the holographic display of Earth's latest developments. Their leader, a warrior named Chorus, stood at the head of the table, his dark, piercing eyes scanning the projections of human activity. "These humans have gained power beyond our understanding," Horus growled, his voice thick with anger. "They could threaten everything we've built. We must prepare for war." One of his advisors, a sharp-minded strategist named Xil'Vaan, spoke calmly. "We do not yet know how to defeat them. Their abilities are unpredictable, and their power over time and space gives them an advantage we cannot counter. It would be unwise to attack without more information." Chorus snarled, "We have never backed down from a challenge. These humans will learn their place in the galaxy." But Chorus's fury was not shared by all the Arel. Xil'Vaan, ever the tactician, felt the weight of the decision on her shoulders. "We cannot underestimate them. If we engage them in full conflict, we risk destabilizing the entire galaxy. If their powers continue to grow unchecked, they could destroy us all." "We will not be destroyed," Chorus said, his voice resolute. "We will strike first." But before the Arel could put their plans into action, another power in the galaxy had begun to take interest. The Centaur, a race of ancient beings who had transcended physical form, had watched the humans rise with growing unease. The Centaur existed as pure consciousness, able to perceive the universe in ways no other species could. They had learned to protect the cosmic order from those who threatened it, but humanity was different. The Centaur could feel the fabric of the universe shifting as the humans bent time and space. They could see the ripples spreading out from Earth, disrupting the natural flow of reality. They were concerned, but they also recognized the potential for something more, something that had never existed before. Humanity was not just a species that had unlocked new abilities. They were a force that could change the very nature of existence. Xil'Vaan, the leader of the Centaur, spoke to the others in the collective consciousness. "We must observe them carefully. They are both a threat and a potential boon. But if they are not guided, if they are left to their own devices, they will tear apart the universe." The Centaur deliberated for days, carefully analyzing the humans' behavior and their use of power. They could see that the humans were struggling with their newfound abilities. They were overwhelmed by the potential of what they had unlocked. Some used their powers for good, creating new technologies and curing diseases. Others, however, used their abilities for selfish reasons, manipulating time to gain wealth or power, erasing mistakes or rewriting history to their advantage. It was becoming clear that humanity was struggling to maintain control over their own abilities. They had no idea what they were unleashing upon the galaxy, and their lack of understanding was dangerous. The Centaur, in their infinite wisdom, realized that they would have to intervene. But how? On Earth, the human government was in disarray. President Arya Novak, the first leader to fully grasp the implications of the new powers, was overwhelmed by the pressure of her position. She had been a symbol of hope in the early days, rallying the world to work together and use their abilities for the greater good. But now, with the galaxy watching and factions within her own people beginning to turn on each other, her leadership was being tested like never before. "We cannot let this power corrupt us," Arya said during a speech to the United Nations. "We must maintain our moral compass, our humanity, even as we explore the boundaries of what we can do." But her words were falling on deaf ears. The factions that had formed on Earth, those who sought to dominate and those who sought to build, were growing in power. Some human factions had already begun to use their abilities for conquest, striking at rival nations or attempting to expand their influence across the stars. Others, like Arya's coalition, sought peace and cooperation with the galaxy's other civilizations. but they were finding it increasingly difficult to keep the peace. As the humans continued to experiment with their powers, the consequences became more severe. Whole cities began to disappear, caught in time loops or destroyed by unstable space distortions. Entire star systems were destabilizing as the fabric of reality itself began to warp. Time itself was becoming unreliable. People could no longer trust that tomorrow would come or that history was immutable. The galaxy, once so orderly and predictable, was now a place of uncertainty and fear. The Troraki, the Arel, the Centaur, each race had their own methods of maintaining control. But none had anticipated the rise of a species that could control the very fabric of the universe. And so, the first steps toward confrontation began. The Qatari, the Arel, and the Troraki all began to mobilize, preparing for the inevitable conflict with humanity. The galaxy was no longer at peace. The humans had crossed a line, and now they would face the consequences of their unchecked power. Would they be able to control the powers they had unleashed, or would the galaxy fall into chaos, forever altered by humanity's rise? The days following the initial surge of power were ones of uncertainty and fear. Humanity was no longer simply a species. Now they were a force that had the ability to alter time itself, to manipulate space, to undo reality in ways previously reserved for the gods. And yet, as vast as their new abilities were, the people of Earth struggled to understand them. Power on this scale was, in itself, terrifying. The truth was, no one truly understood what had happened to them, or the price that might come with it. What if the very fabric of space and time was unraveling? If the Star Trek movie's accurate? The question began to haunt the minds of the leaders, the scientists, the everyman who had lived his life untouched by anything more extraordinary than technology. Now technology was nothing. Humanity had transcended the need for technology. It was all within them now. But what did that mean for the future? Dr. Lana Voss, the scientist who had overseen the original experiment, found herself at the center of the storm. She had been hailed as a hero, the one who had unlocked the potential of humanity. Yet, she couldn't escape the gnawing doubt that had settled deep within her. They had opened a door, yes, but what lay beyond it? Despite her growing fears, she could not ignore the calls. The world had become unrecognizable in a mere matter of weeks. The global government had been in crisis mode, trying desperately to rein in the powers they had unleashed. They imposed mandatory training for anyone exhibiting the ability to manipulate time and space. But, just as quickly as laws were set in place, they were bent and broken by those who sought to exploit them. People who had never known what it was to be powerless now felt invincible. They could do anything they wanted. But some began to ask, if they could undo past mistakes, if they could create new realities where they were always right, where did the line between good and evil blur? What if power itself became a weapon to dominate and control? The answer to those questions began to manifest quickly. Wars broke out, not in the traditional sense, but in a more terrifying form. Reality itself was being rewritten. Entire cities disappeared in moments, erased from existence. The great battlefields of history were not fought with guns and bombs, but with the manipulation of time itself. Someone would blink, and suddenly their entire past would be rewritten. Those were not killed, they were simply erased from the timeline, as though they had never existed at all. But it wasn't just the humans who were starting to realize the scale of the catastrophe. In the far reaches of the galaxy, the powers that had long controlled the stars, beings far older and far more advanced than humanity could even comprehend, began to stir. They watched Earth with increasing dread, knowing that the rise of this new power was something they could not ignore. The Troraki, the first to recognize the potential danger humanity posed, watched closely. They had once believed the humans to be a primitive species, too young, too chaotic to ever be a real threat. But now, their collective telepathic network began to buzz with alarm. For the first time in centuries, the Troraki were afraid. They had seen races rise and fall, but this was different. The humans had the potential to rewrite history itself, and no one could predict the outcome of such a cataclysmic change. Zorath, the leader of the Troraki, knew that something had to be done. "We cannot wait any longer. The fabric of space and time is fraying. The humans are too powerful, too unstable," he warned. "If we do not act now, it may be too late." But even as Zorath plotted the Troraki's next move, the Arel, another more militant species, were watching with growing impatience. The Arel were a race of genetically engineered warriors who had, for eons, prided themselves on their dominance across the galaxy. Their empire was vast, stretching to the farthest reaches of space, and they had conquered countless worlds. But the humans had thrown everything into chaos. Time and space were no longer predictable, and the Arel, used to controlling their destinies with the certainty of battle, found themselves at a loss. Horus, the Arel leader, was not one to sit idly by while a threat loomed on the horizon. The Arel's superior military technology, coupled with their highly engineered bodies, made them formidable opponents. But the humans were different. They didn't rely on advanced weapons or technology. They had become the weapon. Horus understood the risk that the humans posed. If they could rewrite history, could undo entire wars, the Arel's place at the top of the galaxy could quickly slip away. "We cannot allow this power to exist unchallenged," Horus said, his tone a low growl, his words sharp with finality. "We will act swiftly. We will destroy them before they realize how dangerous they are." But not everyone in the galaxy was as quick to react. The Centaur, a race that had long transcended physical form, had been watching Earth from a more detached perspective. The Centaur were beings of pure consciousness, capable of perceiving reality itself in ways no other species could. They had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the coming and going of countless species, and had always intervened when the natural order was at risk. Yet they had never encountered a species quite like the humans. The Centaur understood that humanity was not inherently evil or dangerous. The humans had simply unlocked something they weren't ready for. The sheer scale of their power, being able to manipulate time and space, had the potential to tear the very fabric of existence apart. If they were allowed to continue unchecked, the Centaur feared the entire galaxy could be at risk. But there was something else at play here. The Centaur had learned over millennia that every force in the universe had a purpose, even the chaotic and unpredictable ones. Humanity, in their eyes, was simply too young, too unformed, to grasp the implications of their newfound power. They had the potential for both creation and destruction, and it was the Centaur's job to guide them. Solana, the leader of the Centaur, convened a council of her people. They had felt the ripples across the galaxy, the distortions in time and space caused by the humans. And while there was fear, there was also curiosity. If guided properly, humanity might become the greatest force for creation the universe had ever seen. But if left unchecked, they could also be its undoing. "We must intervene," Solana said. Her voice was like a ripple across the fabric of time itself. "But we cannot simply impose our will. The humans must come to understand the consequences of their actions on their own terms. They need a guide, someone who can teach them how to control their powers."
Never.
The Centaur were not a race that believed in force. They believed in subtlety, in influence. And so they began to weave a plan, not to dominate the humans, but to gently guide them toward understanding their place in the universe. They would offer knowledge, but they would also allow the humans to make their own choices. After all, that was the way of the universe, balance between creation and destruction, order and chaos. The humans had the power to tip that balance either way. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the situation had reached a boiling point. As humans tested the boundaries of their abilities, the consequences became more severe. Entire cities blinked in and out of existence. Mass panic ensued when entire populations of people found themselves vanishing for days at a time, their memories altered. For some, the reality they returned to was not their own. People were suddenly living lives they had never led, unaware that the world had changed around them. President Arya Novak, struggling to keep control over her own fractured government, knew that time was running out. The world was on the brink of collapse. Factions within her own country were using the powers for their own gain, rewriting history to fit their desires. Others had fallen into madness, unable to comprehend the enormity of what they had become. It's true, everything is blowing apart. No one can understand anymore. Yet there were still those who tried to hold on to their humanity, the ones who used their abilities to heal, to protect, to build a better world. They were the ones who still believed in the potential for good in the universe. But even as Arya tried to rally the forces of peace, she knew the galaxy was watching. She had received communications from various factions, each warning of the coming storm. The humans had become a threat, and Earth was on the verge of becoming the center of a galactic conflict. The galaxy was preparing for war, but humanity had yet to understand the true cost of their power. They had unlocked something that no one had anticipated, a power so great that it could unmake reality itself. And as each moment passed, the stakes grew higher. Would humanity choose to wield their power responsibly, or would they become the harbingers of destruction? The first sparks of conflict were already beginning to ignite. The galaxy had watched, waited, and now they had come to a decision. Earth was no longer just a world. It was a flashpoint. The outcome of this galactic struggle would decide not only humanity's future, but the fate of the galaxy itself. The human race was about to face the greatest test it had ever known.